Welcome to Snark Chocolate, a show about ZK products where we break them down with rich flavors and sweet insights. My name is Omer and I'll be co-hosting this episode together with Queenie. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Liz Steininger, CEO and Managing Director, and Anna Kaplan, Security Researcher, Engineer, and Trainer from List Authority. List Authority is a company on a mission to advance digital security and preserve privacy as fundamental human right. So Liz, Anna, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Can you please introduce yourselves? Liz, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm Liz, the CEO. I've been with Least Authority for a while, since about 2016, and I'm happy to talk about how we got started and everything.
And hello, my name is Anna Kaplan. I am a security and cryptography researcher at Least Authority. I'm specialized in cryptography and zero-knowledge proofs. I've been with Least Authority also for a couple of years now, reviewed a lot of ZK projects and cryptography implementations.
Thank you. So List Authority was founded in 2011, as far as I can tell. And both of you joined a bit later. I'm very curious to hear about the story of the company. Maybe you can take us back to the origins of the company and tell us and start from there.
Yeah, happy to. So Least Authority was, as you noted, founded in 2011. Yeah, it was founded in 2011. And in about 2016, the Zcash project spun out of Least Authority and became separate from Least Authority. So yeah, the whole Zcash team that was originally founding Zcash, they basically came from Least Authority. So they became their own thing in about 2016, and that's when I took over as CEO. Zuko was the original CEO of Least Authority, starting in 2011 until 2016. So our roots with ZK basically go back to those days. The Zcash project was when Least Authority was first, into ZK, you could say.
That's interesting. So you have roots that are with ZK and Zcash, maybe the first real ZK in the wild. And what Anna mentioned is that she's been working for the past few years on ZK projects. What happened in between? How the company evolved over time?
Yeah. So when Zcash spun out to be its own thing, that wasn't the end of the story for our involvement in the ZK space. That was just the beginning for us. So since that time, we knew about zero-knowledge proofs and what they were capable of, obviously, from that experience. And so we wanted to still, keep an eye on it and participate in the world with ZK. But like you said, Zcash was the first real production system using ZK. And so there wasn't a whole lot in the beginning years as to, projects that we could work with that were working on ZK. We started doing ZK audits about 2018, and that was we did an audit of Zcash. So a few years afterwards, we were able to be hired as a separate entity at that point in time to help them with their audit. And, we were auditing stuff that we hadn't created, et cetera, by that point. After that, we continued to look at ZK systems from the security auditing perspective. Also, in those earlier years, I think it started in about 2019. We started working on zero-knowledge access passes, ZCAPs as we call them, but basically a way to prevent the connection of payment data from customers to the actual usage of the storage service that we were operating. So previously it was S4, now it's called private storage. And we wanted to implement a way to keep that data from payments separate from their use of the storage service. And so we basically did, ZCAPs for it. And we released a white paper on this in 2021, I believe.
Okay, so a lot of interesting topics to cover. We'll try to do it shortly. Before that, I want to take advantage of this opportunity and learn more about the audit process. At least, I knew List Authority first as an audit company. I know that, as you mentioned, you are doing a bunch of other stuff, but maybe you can tell us more about audits first. And to start with, maybe walk us through the process of a security audit? It's kind of like the high level.
I can definitely talk from the high level, and then I think it would be great for Anna to add some details about more about the auditing from a cryptographer perspective. From the high level, I mean, zero knowledge proof audits or security audits focusing on systems using zero knowledge proofs are pretty similar to other security audits in the process that we follow. So, and it's pretty standard at this point in time, but you know, scoping it and planning prior to when the audit starts, we kick it off with the client team. We do our initial review and do an initial audit report, and that includes all kinds of findings that we've got. So whether it be specific issues and vulnerabilities that we found, or if it's suggestions and just general observations that we've got of the system and its current security state. And so then, the team can go ahead and make the changes that they want to make based on our reported findings. And then we also do this verification review. So we come back and review again, and then those changes that we see implemented, then we comment on those and we produce a final audit report. And many of those are published on our website for people to see too.
Trying to ask it from my perspective as a potential working on a project that has some security or privacy, or I don't know, you define, or that's what I'm getting at. Like at which point in time, or like when should I consider to approach List Authority for an audit?
Oh, anytime, as soon as possible. There's all kinds of answers that we can have for that. But basically, as soon as you recognize that that's what you want to do, is a good time to reach out to us. We have teams that come to us at a variety of times. I mean, we have teams that come to us as late as saying, hey, could we start an audit yesterday? We need to launch tomorrow, where it's very last minute. And we do the best we can in those situations to meet their desired schedule. But we also have other teams that come to us, while they're still in development, or even prior to that, they can come to us when they're in the really early stages of, we've got a white paper and we want to have this audited, and we want to talk about like good strategies for securing our system prior to it being implemented. So really anytime is the right time, but depending on what you want in terms of like outcome from us, then sooner is better.
Anna and Liz, I'm curious, what are the tricky parts about cryptography cases compared to non-cryptography cases?
Maybe I can help answer that. So in terms of cryptography, you have to think about it in a different way to other implementation things. So normally when teams develop a project, they're thinking about the minimal project that they can develop, and they're like, first of all, like thinking about just the functionality to work, right? They're just thinking, okay, how can we get this to be seen? How can we get this to work? And when it comes to security parts of a project, or especially cryptography parts, those are very critical and like sometimes are an afterthought. And being an afterthought in cryptography is a big problem, because for cryptography you need to take into consideration a lot of different things. For example, the communication channels, how the network is structured, how the parties are being handled. There's keys which need to be handled, like generated, but then also stored. And the data formatting and how you serialize and deserialize all this data needs to be handled with a lot of care, because these things, all these components, they go for your security and your privacy, right? So the problem is, and if you just render in an app, I guess, or in a web app or something, if you render something in a way and it's in the first iteration that you have, maybe it's not that pretty or something, it's not necessarily a problem. When it comes to security critical infrastructure, if your deserialization goes wrong for your data, or you don't store your keys in a security reliant way, this means that this will lead to a loss of funds or like other very heavy things. And this is like in general, like I would say a rule of thumb for security implementations, or like security critical implementations. But for cryptography, since they have a lot of math involved, you really need to be very sure of the specific math you're using, and you have to handle it with a lot of care. So coming in as early as possible, or thinking about them very carefully, is definitely helpful in comparison to other implementation work that you might be doing for your project.
Are there any methods or tools that you're currently using for cryptography cases? Are they how useful they are, and what are the limitations?
You mean for auditing cryptography? Any tools to do
Yes.
that? So it really depends on the project. And I know that people don't like to hear that because they would like a specific tool out of the box. But it really depends on the project, because we don't audit only, for example, one programming language or one ecosystem. We audit tons of different things. So for all these different things, sometimes there is tooling that we can use. We can either check for dependencies, or we can check for vulnerabilities with some sort of tooling. But in a lot of times, we do a manual code review, which then is the most effective way for us to find bugs in the cryptographic code, also interactively with the project team.
So I understand that audit is a very sensitive process, kind of like between you and the customer. Maybe share more about, once you already go into this process, once you decided either out of emergency or in some kind of just as part of your product roadmap to go into an audit process, what should we expect? What's the time span, the milestones, and the output of such a process?
Yeah, for audits, with ZK projects, they usually take a little bit longer than than say like a smart contracts audit, for example. So, like Anna was saying, anything that involves cryptography just has a different layer of issues that we have to basically look for. So, I'd say on average, the ZK related projects that have some sort of element of ZK in them, they usually are going to take more in the weeks range, sometimes in the months range. So we're looking usually like 4 weeks to maybe even 12 weeks. We try not to go too much longer than that. But of course, on occasion, if we're looking at, say, like just a short specification or something like that, then it could also be a project that's just a few days. So it really just depends on the scope of the review as to how long it will take.
See. So I think I asked from the perspective of list authority and from the perspective of the customer. I want to ask also from the perspective of the actual auditor. So maybe, Anna, you can answer this. So how do you become an auditor, right? So one day you learn cryptography, you become very good at cryptography, you know how to do software engineering, and then what? What steps you need to take? I mean, if you are now going to write a cryptography project, some implementation, does that mean you're not going to have bugs because you have background as auditor?
That's a great question, actually. And I think on the last part of your question, will you not have bugs? I think, depending on the project, you will definitely have bugs depending on what you do. And then you have to review them again and, learn from them. But how to become an auditor, I think, is a very intricate, interesting question, because as you say, just learning cryptography, just working in cryptographic implementations or on software implementations, will you be interested in auditing? You can never tell, because we have seen, like in our team in general, we have different sorts of like backgrounds. There's mathematicians who worked on pure mathematics. There's people who did tons of software implementations. There's people who are really knowledgeable about theoretic cryptography or specialists in this subfield. So to become a really good auditor, you should really be interested in the project and really be keen on finding attacks. So thinking like an attacker is, I think, the first thing that you need to do. And to become a really good auditor, you should really have really attacker mindset and think about threat models for your projects constantly. And the second thing that you should really be good at is learning fast and learning very effectively, because normally, like as Liz mentioned, our timeframes are really short, and there's projects which have NDAs, there's projects where there's not that much on the internet to be found, there's not that much documentation or specification, and we still interact a lot with the client team. So you should be very effective in learning, and it's great to learn, like first read all the papers behind it, so you should definitely, be interested in doing that, but you should also be really fast in learning. So this would be my second answer. And then communicating within the team and like outside is really very important. Writing very very clear specification and very clear technical text is quite important as well, because otherwise you cannot really communicate what your attack idea is or why you think there's a weakness in a specific part of the code. Interact also with the project, the client teams that we work with. You sometimes have to translate what they're saying. We have to translate what we are thinking. So you should be very clear on your communication. So I think that's 3 points. And I think it doesn't really matter from which background you come, because Omer, you were asking, is there like a specific like way to become an auditor? I think you need to have a very good basis in one of the things that I mentioned, either mathematics or computer science or any specialties like, the blockchain ecosystems that you're working in, zero knowledge stuff, or in general cryptography expertise. But then you also need to have that sort of attacker mindset and that like interest in breaking things and learning fast and being on like tons of different projects in a very short time frame, which is not for everybody as well. Sometimes people want to work on something for a long time and build things. As auditors, we normally have a short time frame, and we are really happy to dive into that and like learn about other people's babies, let's say, and their implementations. And help them. And then, after a couple of weeks, we're like into something else. And we're like, oh, that's a completely different thing. We first did some sort of ZK EVM maybe, and then we went into a threshold signature encryption, for example, or some bridge or something related to that. So this, I think, would be my answer.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Thank you. Okay, so one last question on just for me on the audit process, I promise. I'm very curious on how you guys manage risk. So if you do, and from the other side, when you do some engineering for a project, and you work under constraints, so you are missing stuff, right? So you introduce bugs. But in your line of work, you can also work. You also work under constraints. You can also miss stuff, right? And then it means that either you left some like open bug in a given like project, or that I don't know another audit team discovered something that you missed, like something critical. So how do you look at that, like managing this risk?
So in general, we look at it from like striking a balance between how much time we spend and how thorough of a review can we do. Of course, if there's this idea that if we could review indefinitely, could we find everything? And the idea, and we all know that that's not going to be the case. So then you just have to find like where is the effective balance to deliver value on this. And so that's where we usually come from for the perspective of like scheduling the audits and planning the audits that we do. When it comes to accepting that risk, we try to make sure we also have the right skills coverage. We keep all up to date with the latest things, but we all also accept that security is not something that's ever going to be 100% guaranteed by anyone. So the other thing we recommend teams to do is teams can hire multiple auditing firms to audit at the same time. That could be another strategy to help get different coverage, because different people have different perspectives when it comes to security and finding issues. So there's some various things that we can do to help manage that risk. One being just expectation setting, like I said, about knowing that nothing's going to be 100% guaranteed. And then the second being, how can we kind of spread this kind of knowledge across people and reduce the risk through that breadth of different teams, and the depth of the knowledge of those teams. I don't know, Anna, feel free to jump in if you think there's anything else that we can do from your perspective.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned 100% like encapsulates it, but also just communicating clearly, I think is one of the most important parts as well in our initial and in our final audit reports, just to communicate clearly what we found and what we reviewed, what we did, and like to not just the client, but also like everybody reading the report. So if we publish it in the end for all the like people using the bridge or the app or whatever, it is just for them to understand it fully.
Yes, yeah, and there are times where we cannot review something comprehensively due to situations with the roadmap, or something or other things, or it's just out of scope with the client's plans. And so in those cases, yeah, we also try to capture, like Anna said, what we did and did not review, so people also know the boundaries of this effort that we did.
So I think we understood your connection to ZK Tech, but often you probably do need to learn and to master a new technology, right? So new privacy preserving tech like TEs. Um, how do you make this decision? Like you could just get enough incoming requests for audits for projects that use, I don't know, fully homomorphic encryption, and then you decide, well, we do need to learn fully homomorphic encryption or to have some expert in the team. Like how do you kind of like figure out when you need to master some technology?
Yeah, it ends up being pretty organic on our team, and it works really well that way. That our team is very interested in like this kind of bleeding edge of technology, the latest innovations and stuff. So our team is always looking out and watching what's going on in the space, and especially in the cryptography space, and see how things are advancing. Like Anna mentioned, knowing about like the academic papers, going to conferences and stuff like that, even just like talking to lots of people who are working on stuff prior to them being published, etc. And so we know what might be coming, and then we watch for projects that are implementing some of the latest, cryptographic techniques, etc. And then yeah, we look at those getting implemented, and then we hope that they need an audit, and we hope that they reach out or consider us as a firm to do it. And so by the time the audits come along, there's usually at least some significant awareness and education that's already been done on our team prior to even that coming. And then there's usually relationship somehow with prior work that we've done. But yeah, so it happens organically that we see this stuff coming and we're interested in it. And then we are able to hopefully do some audit work on that.
Are there any emerging trends or privacy tech that you are observing at the moment that you can highlight?
Yeah, maybe I can dive into some of the things that recently we've spoken about in the team. So one thing that we are closely following or like looking at research in the space is on fully homomorphic encryption. We've seen there is like tons of things going around there. And related to that, since fully homomorphic encryption is based on like lattice-based things, we're also really interested in lattice-based zero knowledge. So there's been a lot of work on doing zero knowledge proofs or polymer commitment schemes on lattices or through lattice-based cryptography. This has the advantage to be post-quantum secure. We do have Fry and we do have things like that, but they're hash-based, right? So and coding based. So we are looking at other things in that sphere, and there's really interesting work right now. I think a lot of the papers have like some sort of dog titles. They're like called Greyhound and other things. So we are not we have not yet seen an audit there, but we're like seeing if something comes up and we can learn even more about it. So that's definitely topics that we have in the background kind of like looked at, but not in depth. So let's see if an audit comes up.
So Anna, I've seen you last time in an FAG.org event, and I'm trying to kind of like use let's take ZK for example to kind of like understand your approach when you go deep into a technology. So for ZK, you are known. I mean, you wrote the MoonNet manual. We have a couple of copies in our office. We use them extensively, and also I remember you guys. Like I think we've met also in a ZK proofs event, maybe even more than one, like the standardization of ZK. Kind of like trying to figure out what's the motivation. Like how do you go from, well, you do kind of like feel the industry. You see that there's something happening with ZK. Maybe with ZK is like a unique case because you have like deep roots with ZK. But kind of like how do you get to writing a manual and attending standardization efforts?
Yeah, let me correct you right there. So my colleague Mirko wrote the Moonmath manual, and we have edited in the team. We've reviewed it and edited it and helped on that. But yeah, so main writer, I don't want to take any credit, for that. In general, though, yeah, we have given workshops, for example, on the contents of the Moonmath manual. We have extended on it. We have given examples and audited it. So yeah, that definitely I helped with. I'm also happy to attend like all these events that you mentioned. So I think from my perspective, the thing kind of correlates to a question of like how to be an auditor. So it kind of like, it's not enough to kind of like just like learn some part of cryptography really deeply and then be like, okay, that's that. I know that part really deeply. I mean, then yes, you can do audits on that specific part, right? You can specifically for that, and that's very important to do. Like you shouldn't skip that step. But if you want to do new technology, new emerging stuff, then you kind of like need to always learn new things. And from my perspective, like learning, for me, it's always helpful to give workshops or to present something, to give other people some sort of training, because then I get asked all the questions of how does this actually work? Why is this correct? Can you give us an example? Things like that. And so my learning is deepened as well. So this is why, for example, giving workshops or for Mirko writing a Moonmath manual or in general, like even external or internal workshops is a very motivational thing for learning. As a very good, like as an auditor who is like interested in new things, you should always be interested in like learning new tech, because there will always be like new technology, and if you just stop at some point, you will maybe be able to audit like some sort of like some specific thing, and that really well, and that's great. But yeah, there's always new things being developed. And for attending like these conferences and like standardization processes, I think it's very important to kind of like be on the hallway track, as I say, like not necessarily like the talks are immensely important. It's always good to like, go to the talks and view them, and maybe even if you missed one, watch it afterwards on YouTube. But one of the really interesting parts for me is the hallway track, as some friends and I call it, where people are in the back discussing new things, new ideas that they have, and attack ideas that, in that year, it's just an idea, and the next year, it's going to be a talk. So things like that are super important, and it's really hard to do if you just stay at home and focus on the things that you already know. So, yeah.
So you also build some privacy-centric products. Based on what I've seen, you have private storage, private payments, private file sharing. So you definitely live up to your name. First, can you share more about like each one of these products, how it came to be, and what they do?
Yeah, so our work originally it started with the private storage part of it. There's this project called Tahoe LAFS, the least authority file store, but Tahoe Laughs is how some of us call it by short. It's an open source project for distributed secure file storage that was started back in about 2008, 2009. So it even predates Least Authority as a company. And this is an open source project that's been around, and it was even talked about, I think, on like the Bitcoin forums and stuff like that. So it comes from that era, the cypherpunk movement, etc. And so with Tahoe Laughs, we wanted to build like a kind of some level of commercial offering with Tahoe Laughs. And so that's what we started working on. Our first version was S4, the simple secure storage service. And then we replaced that with private storage back in like 2020-ish, 2019. I lose track of the years now. But there's some history on our website, some old blog posts that goes through all the details of what we did. And that's where the zero knowledge access passes came from. And that's the private, the kind of private payments aspect. And we're not trying to be like a private payment service completely by any means. We were just trying to utilize zero knowledge proofs to help how the payments data and the usage data of that storage service interacted. And then with the secure or private file transfer, that also was kind of a spin out from our work with private storage, that we also needed a way to Basically, I guess I should quickly say that Tahoe Labs is a capability-based system. It uses capability-based security. So instead of having a username and password to interact with the system, you have a capability string that needs to be securely stored. And when we had to do the initial setup with this storage system and get people onboarded, we had to have a way to like just bootstrap sharing that. And so we needed a secure transfer of that. And so we came across another open source project, Magic Wormhole. And then we realized that this was a really cool tool because it's a way to do file transfer without needing to have, again, any any personal information. So no username, no password, no phone number gathering, like none of that kind of personal data is needed to be able to transfer a file with that. And so we also created something called Winden, which is basically a front end for it. You can go to winden.app and use it for free if you want. That was funded by EU grants to be able to get that to that point. And then we also created an Android and iOS app front end for that file transfer too, through another grant. So through GrantWorks, we were able to like do some kind of spin-off work for those. So that's kind of where they all came from and how they're related.
They are still like some of them are still in active development. You're still updating and pushing some features.
Yeah, in different ways. So with private storage, it's live and you can use it. We're not actively developing new features at the moment, but we're discussing what those could be or should be in the near future. With Winden, it's definitely it's paused also, but you can go use it. It's just a web app to send files in a very privacy preserving way. So in terms of like features, sometimes you just don't need a whole lot of fancy features. Sometimes you just need it to simply do the job. And then what we are exploring more of potential with is the zero knowledge access passes and how those could be possibly useful for other systems out there. So yeah, that's another possible opportunity for us and how that could turn into a service for other people at some point in the future.
Talking about grants, so I've seen that you were awarded a grant from EF, the Ethereum Foundation, to formally verify two protocols, Steer and Weir. So first, like now we introduce formal verification into the mix, which I'm just curious, like how does it fit in? I mean, is this like a tool you've been using already, or is it like something new that you need to learn? And second, maybe you can share more about like this specific project. Why do we need to formally verify Steer and Weir to begin with? And yeah, what tools are you using for that, and what implementation are you using for that, and so on?
Yeah, we can definitely that was a really interesting project. So for your first question, like, have we seen that? Have we used that in auditing? You were asking before about tools that we use in auditing. Actually, we have not been using formal verification tooling in audits before. There has been some projects where we proposed it or where we discussed it with some clients, but in the end, before this specific project, it was always too costly and seen as not effective enough in the audit, because you need like so much work to actually formalize the construction, to write definitions, to formalize the lemmata and theorems, and to actually write the proof. And clients, a lot of times, we proposed it sometimes, but a lot of times clients then went with a manual code audit, what we normally do with our like team, which works interactively and through different disciplines normally, because that was just more effective to actually find security bugs. So yeah, we were like actually kind of very excited to do this project together with the Ethereum Foundation. So they have a huge effort right now to have the ZK EVM formally verified, or to have every tooling possible to have effectively then have it possible to have ZK EVMs formally verified. So all kind of components which are needed then in ZK EVM should be formalized. In this specific setting, we have there's different building blocks which are right now worked on. And all these are being summarized, are being formalized in a library right now called ArcLib. So that's what that zkVM formal verification effort, what they're working on. It's a library called ArcLib. And our team proposed 2 different protocols to add to that mix. In our team, that was mainly Pulami and Mirko who were working on that. And these 2 different protocols, as you mentioned, are Steer and Weir. And these constructions are quite nice and important because they also belong in this class of possibly post-quantum secure constructions to get zero-knowledge proof. So in this case, Starks, as does Fry. And the effort, the Ethereum Foundation's effort, prioritizes these constructions as much as I have heard. So my colleagues Mirko and Pulami worked intensely on this. They worked together with Nethermind, who were working on formally verifying Fry. So what Mirko and Pulami did is that they created definitions and formalized the lemma and statement theorems. This is called blueprinting for Steer and Weir. And because these protocols are so immensely complex and need to be working together with the rest of the ArcLib library, this was quite some heavy lifting. Nethermind are also, just for context, creating they are creating the coding theory definitions and the blueprinting of Fry, and they're still working on it, and hopefully they'll be done soon. As much as I know, Pulami and Mirko just finished last week on our effort for Steer and Weir. So more info in general on this effort can be found, I think if you Google just verified zkVM. So this is quite some interesting work. Yeah, there's still more to do, definitely. So I can also dive into that if you want, but yeah.
What are the most significant challenges that the project is currently facing?
You mean for the formalization effort?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think right now, they've, our team, they did the blueprints for Steer and Weir, right? So I think then they have next steps to follow for this specific part, which would be actually formalize the constructions of Steer and Weir in Lean. But this must also be done when checking with real-world implementation. So I think they're still waiting for which real-world implementations they would be looking at, and then take on these next steps and then derive the proofs from that. So I think that would be next steps in general. In general, I think there's this whole effort. I think there's so many people involved, and I think they're really getting so much progress done. I think it's quite interesting to see, what they prioritize, who comes together, and it's also really cool because so many people are learning Lean, because that is the tool and the language that they're using. So yeah, I think that's quite.
So Anna, are you using AI here in the case, or do you think AI would be helpful?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. We're definitely internally discussing a lot about the usage of AI and how to use LLMs and agents for our work. So yes, there's we are definitely test running some of the tools that exist for these things, and but we also have to keep in mind always the legal structure of the audits. I think maybe you've heard out from this call that we always want to keep the clients as private as possible, and to adhere to our legal requirements. So yeah, we're still trying to make that possible. We were testing out a lot of things. I think within this formal verification project, as I heard my colleagues do that, they also used AI to learn and LLMs to learn, definitely. And also in auditing, we're testing things out. But we have not yet formalized a process of how to specifically do that. There's still pitfalls. I think we're testing different models as well, different things that exist right now in the world. And some of our team members are more optimistic and some less when it comes to these tools. So yeah, some are really optimistic and think we'll not have a job, next 3 years. And some are saying, okay, there is definitely things where, LLMs help us. But there's also things where, you kind of still need somebody to oversee the agents and some knowledge which is not yet where the LLM is not yet trained on, and things which you need to connect, and things which are so mathematically complex that even a tiny hallucination will, give off a completely wrong picture. And the attacker mindset that I mentioned before is something that an LLM can, to some degree, get to. but also sometimes connecting all the dots is what an effective attacker is doing, because there's so many different components sometimes that, yeah, an LLM doesn't have enough capacity to kind of go through there. I don't know if this helps as an answer, but we're definitely testing it out and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, I just gonna add that it's pretty on the auditing side, it's pretty mixed as to what's effective and but it's really just been at most supportive of the manual code review work that we do. On the ops side, we're seeing like some of the team find AI incredibly helpful for some like operational tasks and stuff like that. So whether it be like helping out with like communications or summarizing stuff, analysis, like some of the stuff that's a little bit more popularized in terms of people using AI in their companies and stuff. So we're I'd say beyond experimenting with that with some teams, that they can regularly use it to help reduce the kind of overhead needed as biased humans. But on the auditing front, there still seems to be a lot of progress to be made, but it's promising in some ways, like Anna said.
Yeah, this is super interesting. So we're talking about that we leverage AI to do some security jobs, right? But there's also another angle that's maybe you can help to find bugs in AI. So have you ever considered contributing to AI safety or AI security efforts?
Yeah, definitely. We are very interested in that topic too. But yeah, there's just such a variety of ways that we could contribute on that too. And there's just so many considerations with them, and a lot of the models are still quite large that are being actively used. So I think as we see more like agentic work and more people experimenting with different applications, um, it there should be more opportunity for us too. But yeah, there's so many just different layers to what it means to even have AI be secure, whether it be like anything from like hallucination and bias or like, data in, output, all kinds of stuff. There's so many different areas to cover. Um, I think there's lots of opportunity, and that's exciting.
That's true. And do you see any compelling intersections emerging between AI, cryptography, and the security?
I think, well, I'll speak first and then I'll let Anna go too. But what I find it's very exciting to see the applications of privacy enhancing technologies and cryptographic techniques to AI systems. So, and that's the area that I think one area that our team is very excited and hopeful about. Like, can we be using like zero knowledge proofs in different ways that we interact with AI systems to enhance privacy of the users? Um, in all kinds of, again, there's different points where that privacy can be had, and different parties that you're trying to keep data private from at different points. And so that's really, really interesting. And then I'm sure Anna has even more in depth in terms of the cryptographic implementations. I mean, cryptographic techniques that can be applied to AI.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite an interesting field. So there's like from fingerprinting LLMs, like I think that's one thing that I've heard recently, which people have been discussing. That's like super interesting way. And there to like ZKML to use cryptographic techniques to enable that verification of LLMs. That's also very interesting, like thing to like think about. And like I think FHE also, like, there's techniques from FHE where you like we have this like encrypted data where you do manipulations on them. Like I think techniques from them could also maybe connect to kind of the LLM idea. And then recently I've also been at Real World Crypto in Sophia, and there was even a talk by Adi Shamir where he kind of had very interesting ideas of how to connect those two things. But yeah, I think there's a lot going on, and we could dive into that, but I think that would be a different whole podcast session. And maybe you need like other experts, because I'm just an enthusiast, I think, on this topic. Yeah.
So, I guess that leads to our final question. It's a routine question that we ask everyone. So please name a project that you're bullish about.
I think from my perspective, I think I can be like a little bit, like coming from Least Authority. I think I would mention like our own, but not like in terms of like privacy preserving tech, but not just because they're like these projects are from Least Authority. I think in general, like I'm bullish, I guess, about like privacy enhancing tech in general, because the problem is always that users don't really like see the benefit, or it's not necessarily like useful, or I don't know. Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why there's not that huge user base, but I'm always very excited about really cool privacy enhancing tech, like whatever it may be, if it is for the people and really like, helps people and has a like future for like privacy in them. So I think that would be my answer. Like everything that has privacy at its core, is really something that I'm excited about.
It feels a bit obvious to say this, but yeah, I mean, we work for a company that's prioritizing privacy because we all, as individuals, genuinely care about it. But I mean, as someone I've been looking at like secure comms tech and like, the privacy side of tech now for over a decade, and yeah, probably like 12 years. and during that time, it's every year I get more and more excited about the projects that we're seeing out there, because it's not that people were doing boring stuff 12 years ago. It's just that the applications of some of the advanced cryptography are just getting they're getting so far ahead now and so innovative, and they're being implemented in ways that are actually usable for people, that that things like privacy and even the fundamental of security is now way more accessible for regular developers, and then the end user has more options now. So it's just really exciting, and so I feel like I just get bullish about every project that's out there, and I'm just like, anyone, please keep working on this stuff. But I'm really, really excited about how we can apply advanced cryptography to AI ML stuff, because that is where I think we'll see some fundamental advancements and can unblock us on a lot of challenges that we have working with current LLMs and the issues around like privacy especially, but even security and how we trust them, that I think can be fundamentally shifted with the use of advanced cryptography with it. So yeah, I think the next 5 to 10 years should be extremely exciting.
That's exciting. And we're also excited about the technology. That's why we are having this podcast. Cool. So, Anna and Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to learn about the different aspects and amazing works you're building at Least Authority. So, for those interested to learn more, we've added some links in the show notes. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to be